Hello, and welcome to the Nonfiction Kidlit Craft Conversations podcast, where we take a deep dive into the craft and business of children's nonfiction featuring new release authors. I'm your host, Kirsten Larson, author of Reimagining Your Nonfiction Picture Book. Today, I have with me native Hawaiian author Kamalani Hurley, whose debut book, Kaho'olawe, The True Story of an Island and Her People, illustrated by Harinani Orme, is published by Millbrook Press and is a Junior Library Guild selection. Congrats, Kamalani, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kirsten. Yeah, it was a surprise that my debut book would get that kind of recognition. I'm humbled and thrilled at the same time.
Well, as someone who has already read and recommended the book to many, I can say that the honor is well deserved. So, for those who haven't had a chance to read it yet, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your book.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. Um, my name is Kamalani, and I live on the island of Oahu. I live in Mililani, which is sort of the middle of the island. For many, many years, I was a professor at the community college and through the University of Hawaii system. I taught linguistics and business writing for decades. And I have to tell you, I loved it. I mean, I really did. I loved my students. I loved my colleagues too. I'm not being generous. They really because they might be watching. No,
They'll be listening.
I kid. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. But it was time, I think, finally to I had grandkids and I wanted to spend time with them. And I also it was a time where towards my retirement where I was able to promote student writing and student arts. I love doing that. I was just so inspired. And finally it was like, you know what, maybe it's time for me now that I'm more mature. And I can retire. My husband had just retired from the utility. And so I started taking classes. And one of the first classes I took was yours, Kirsten.
And I remember that's how we first connected.
It was great. Your class, I took a class with Candy Fleming. Yeah, that's right. Candy Fleming. I took Rob Sanders. I took all kind of classes. That was a really important thing because I had done business writing so long and I didn't really have the skills for children's writings. I thought anybody can write a kid's book, right? I mean, so few words, what the heck? And as it turns out, oh my God, because there are so few words, you really got to make sure that each word counts, that there is an arc. There's just so much. It's not the same as, making up a story that you tell your child or your grandchild. It's much more. So in one of the classes that I had taken with Candy Fleming, it was a middle grade narrative nonfiction class. And so I had always wanted to write about the island of Kaho'olawe. It is an island that I'm not the only one, throughout my childhood, I believed the story that Kaho'olawe was just a rock. It was just dead. There was nothing there. And so because the military had taken over the island the day after the bombing of Pearl Harbor on my island, and they were using it as the #1 military training area in all of the Pacific, I bought into the thing that, oh yeah, good. I mean, at least it's useful for something, right? It can help the military. It can protect us in the world, whatever. We really didn't understand the story. I came out of Candy's class with chapter 1 of a middle grade book on the island of Kaho'olawe. And I thought, someone, I can't remember, but it was part of my critique group, my wonderful writing partners. They said, why don't you try this as a picture book? Because so many people don't know about the story that maybe this is a way to introduce kids and their grown-ups to the story. And so I thought, okie dokie, I'm just going to dive right in. And I ended up with the book that came out last week, Tuesday.
Yay!
It took 3 years. It took 3 years for it to come out. It didn't take me 3 years to write it. I mean, it just sort of came. I have to tell you though, it's the only book I've ever written that just the words came to me. I mean,
Oh,
otherwise, like I imagine, like every other writer, we struggle, right? This one
right.
did not. I don't know what it was. I feel like Kaho'olawe wanted me to tell this story. I mean, I know that sounds kind of goofy, but I feel that,
That's
that,
that's wonderful. Well,
yeah,
and I think so one thing I really wanted to talk to you about is you have adopted a very unusual point of view in your story. So you are kind of telling it through the eyes of the island itself. You could almost sort of call this book a biography of the island. So I'm just curious, you said the story came very easily. Did you always take this approach and how did this idea kind of come to you?
yeah, it actually did. I couldn't imagine doing it any other way. I suppose I could have told it through the eyes of the grassroots organization that had fought for the island to be returned. They fought over 50 years for the island to be returned. Yeah. So I could have, and actually the middle grade book that I had written out of Candy Fleming's class was through their point of view.
Hmm.
But I thought as a picture book, I thought maybe young readers might be able to relate to the little island and its story and how it evolved. Um, you should know though, to Hawaiian people, there is a mutual benefit kind of thing with the land. So we're very connected to the land. I think a lot of indigenous people everywhere will say that. And so the idea is if we take care of the land takes care of us. And if you think of that mutual benefit, if you think about how the island was named even, Kaho'olawe, actually the name is Kanaloa, Kaho'olawe. And Kanaloa is one of the major gods, god of fishing, of deep ocean, of things like this. And so the island is actually named for Kanaloa. And so therefore, the island is imbued with Kanaloa's mana, with Kanaloa's power, his essence. And so, in a way, Kaho'olawe lives. It's sacred to the Hawaiian people because of the Kanaloa connection. It's also a vahipana, and a vahipana is a storied place. And so imagine my surprise as I'm, researching this book for Candy's class and then for the picture book. Oh, it's just a barren, dead rock. I mean, even Cook said that. Captain Cook back in 1774 or 8 or whatever it was. Even he said, oh, it's nothing. It's because Kaho'olawe is not as lush or jungly as the other islands. And that is likely because of its geography. It is really dominated by the huge volcano. It affects the rain clouds and other things that nourish Kaho'olawe. And so Kaho'olawe is full of scrub brush. It is a storied place because of its founding. And part of its history is that it was actually settled by early Polynesian voyagers. I know we've got the movie Moana, which I gotta say I love.
Oh, Moana 2 just
My
came out,
my
yes.
daughter worked on it, but
Oh,
that's,
cool.
yeah, well, behind the scenes kind of a thing. But the idea that these Polynesian voyagers came to the islands, one of the places they landed on was Kaho'olawe. They settled, and my book talks all about that. So
Right.
they settled there. In 1976, a group of activists, they're called the Kaho'olawe Nine. They did what was called the first landing. They did it illegally. people were not allowed to land on the island. People did. I mean, they went, kind of clandestinely. They would go hunting or whatever. But, you never made a big deal of it because the military could come and arrest you. And so this group in January of 1976 went to Kaho'olawe, landed there. It's in the book too. They landed there. And what they found was ancient archaeological sites, house foundations, and places of worship. So the book, it's just like it's like the island just said, okay, go tell my story in my way. This is not the only way. I always tell people, mine is not the only way, the only version to tell a story. It's just how I decided to do it. Me and my illustrator, Harry Nani Orme. Harry is, I'm sure she won't mind me calling her Harry in the internet, but Harry is also a Native Hawaiian. So there are two Native Hawaiians working on this book, and it was great. It was really great. And so I think the mana that we felt came out in the final product of the book.
Well, and I think you talked a little bit about emotional arc, right? And so I think one thing that can be really challenging when you're telling a story about an island or an animal or any book without a human main character, I think sometimes it can be difficult for people to realize that there still needs to be some kind of emotional journey in that book, right? And so you've talked a little bit about your own personal journey and your personal discovery of Kaho'olawe and the fact that it wasn't always this desolate place. And so now you're taking readers on a similar journey. So tell me a little bit about how you went about kind of developing that emotional arc, thinking about that emotional journey for your reader. How, for a lot of folks that's difficult, was that something that was easy for you or something that it took a while to sort of shape?
It did take a while to shape. I was trying to imagine what maybe my granddaughter, for example, if she's learning about Kaho'olawe, what she would relate to. I took a chance, to be perfectly honest. I thought, I could have been shot down, but I took a chance and I thought, I'm going to say that Kaho'olawe has feelings. And so it starts out very positive that Kaho'olawe is happy, very positive language. Later on, when it becomes the military training area, you'll notice that the language becomes more negative. Kaho'olawe is thirsty. But then when the island is returned to the people, and now today with the restoration efforts, again, Kaho'olawe persists. Kaho'olawe thrives. And I wanted to keep the book nonfiction. I didn't want it to become historical, informational fiction or whatever it is. So I'm pleased so far, cross my fingers that so far it is considered nonfiction, even though I have Kaho'olawe is thirsty, Kaho'olawe is hurt. I took a chance on that. The thing I want to say about the last part of it, it could have stayed negative. I could have said Kaho'olawe is hurt, Kaho'olawe is angry, Kaho'olawe is dying, but that wouldn't have been true. It would have been really easy for me to say that, but in reality, I wanted the story to be about hope. And so in the end, the language is hopeful because of the efforts that are taking place right now to restore it culturally and ecologically. And in fact, I think my very last words are Kaho'olawe aloha aina. Kaho'olawe aloha aina. And what that means is love of the land of Kaho'olawe. So it's kind of the guiding force for not only PKO, but for a lot of us who love the land, and especially Kaho'olawe. I hope I answered
Well,
your
yeah,
question.
you did well, and in the back matter, even you give children an idea for how they can help, right? So, I
Yeah.
think even when we're writing, I mean, this is potentially a very heavy topic, right? And this could be a very challenging book to get across to very young audiences. And I think we do have to leave readers with some form of hope. We can't leave them completely powerless, right? So you've kind of traced the journey. You've sort of started with the island, happy and thriving. And then we see it through this deep, dark place. And then we see it come out the other side with the help of all these people, with this community of all these people who want to restore the island, and you have that sense of hope. So in terms of like of an arc, it's this beautiful kind of transformative story that I think honestly can be received even by really young readers, because what's interesting to me is even your refrain where you're talking about the emotions, like Kaho'olawe is happy, that can almost be read like layered text. You know what I mean? Like, and you have sidebars on a
Yes.
lot of the spreads for
Mhm.
readers who want more. So you've really kind of offered multiple ways that this could be read and discovered, even with really young children, which I think is fascinating.
Thank you. That was the plan. If, if it does have layered text, and so it's written for two different readers, I guess, two groups of readers. So young readers, or maybe teachers, their parents or grandparents, could read the approachable language, I'll say. And they can get through the whole story, and they can understand, the basics of what happened to the island. But the sidebars, the little boxes of information there, I felt that it really needed to be in the spread. And so Carol Hinz, my dream editor, Carol, suggested at first that maybe it should go to, so the page doesn't look so spread doesn't look so cluttered. She said, what if we put it in the back matter? When I explained that without the historical and cultural context right there on the spread, um, I don't know, I thought it would lose its Hawaiian-ness. At least that's the words I remember saying to her. She immediately agreed. So I'm very grateful to Carol. I'm very grateful to Carol about that. So I have an example. I'm gonna grab my book here.
Oh,
An
yeah.
example of, it's one of my favorite spreads. See the goats?
Yes.
Aren't they cute? The big goat over here looks like my dog. Um, so it's really cute. Now, if you read the words, it says that, there are a bunch of goats, and they ran amok on the island. And that's all. It's very sweet and cute and all that. But it's not until you read, sorry, waving it all over the place, but it's not until you read the sidebar that you understand that when the goats were introduced to Kaho'olawe, the goats ran amok. I'm not kidding. They were uncontrolled populations of goats that ate everything in sight. Um, they really did. They would climb up the trees and just strip the bark, and they would kill the trees. And so that, along with cattle ranching that was allowed years later, really did help to denude the land. Well-meaning efforts to try to somehow introduce trees, I think they were well intended, because the science wasn't there. And so
Right.
the trees that were introduced actually added to the problem. They actually suck up all the groundwater. And so it was a disaster. Um, you wouldn't know that, though, I think, if the sidebar wasn't available. You could still understand and appreciate the story, I think, without the sidebars. But I feel like perhaps teachers, grandparents, parents, older readers might appreciate knowing that there's a little bit more to, Kaho'olawe is thirsty. There's a lot more than that. So that's why I chose it.
Well, and that's always the trick, isn't it? Especially with sidebars or supplementary information. It's kind of, you have to think about, when does the reader need this? Do they need this when they're reading, or can we expect them to wait until the back matter and to read the back matter? It's kind of a
Exactly.
delicate dance, right?
Exactly. And as nonfiction people, we love back matter.
Yes, we do. And you have plenty.
Absolutely. But
So, in telling the story as you did through the perspective of the island, did that limit you in any way? Was there information that you really wanted to include that you felt like, oh, I just can't get it in because it doesn't fit doing it this way?
I decided that I was going to hit the major historic beats. And so, I did that. I had to leave a lot out. I had to leave a lot of the protests out. I had to leave out the most poignant loss, the loss of two Hawaiian activists. Well, it's a little bit more than that, but they were lost at sea under mysterious, unexplained circumstances in March of 1977. And at first, I had a spread on that. And then I realized that I may be affected and a lot of us may be affected, but I'm not sure that it would tell the story. Well, I don't think that it would add to the story. So it's in a sidebar where I mention George Helm and Kimo Mitchell. I also have a photograph on my website. Harry she went on a huaka'i, a journey to Kaho'olawe, and she took photographs.
Oh,
And there's
wow.
a photograph. Yeah, so I've got a picture. I've got a photograph that she took on with a sort of a memorial plaques to the two souls who were lost. So yeah, I mean, there were things I wanted to say, but if I just kept thinking about the reader, just because I thought it was important, just because I wanted to say it doesn't mean that I should. Maybe there's another way.
Well, and also to your point, I mean, if you are telling the island story, that loss of two activists is um, devastating, for their families, for their community, but if you're looking at the long history of the island, does that pull focus
Right.
away from the story that you're telling, which is the island story?
And that's right. I keep thinking that the story of Kaho'olawe could have gone a lot of different ways. I mean, it really could have taken a different turn if the activists were not dedicated to fighting the system within the system. So their lawsuits, they kept occupying the land, and they were risking arrest and other things. Boy, the sacrifice that they made, it's just astounding. But they could have been violent. They really could have fought and who knows what could have happened. And maybe the history would have turned out different. But because they were dedicated to doing it the Pono way, the right way, they were able to get the island back for the people. So yeah.
I think one thing that has really struck me, throughout our conversation is that this particular book for you was really a process of listening to your instincts as a writer, right? You had instincts about the point of view, you had instincts about putting the emotion on the page. What kind of advice might you give to authors? I mean, all of us, a lot of us struggle with this, struggle with we have an idea, but we're not really sure about trying it. We're worried about what our critique partners might think or what an editor might think. Do you have any advice or tips or encouragement for writers who might be afraid to take those risks?
Sure. Do I have advice? I mean, honestly, who am I? This is my debut. I mean, but I would encourage writers to just go for it. I mean, when I decided I was going to do, Kaho'olawe is happy and Kaho'olawe is this and Kaho'olawe is that, I thought, what if my readers hate it? What if it sounds silly? What if, and I just decided I was just going to try for it. I mean, my critique partners loved it. So I was happy about that. If they had hated it, I don't know. Would I have changed it? I don't know. I was listening to the island, so I'm not sure. But it was nice that I had that encouragement. Although they did ask really interesting questions. They wanted me to be a lot more more political. And I thought that no, the facts themselves will tell the story. The illustrations themselves will show the reader what happened. And so I didn't feel like I needed to be more than just matter of fact, and then adding what I believe the island may have been feeling.
Well, no, but I mean, I think that's great advice, and honestly, the magic of a picture book is they're not that long, right? So if you try something and it's a disaster, how many words do you really have to write? It's not like you wrote a 90,000 word novel that's a
So true.
disaster and it's going to
That's
take
true.
you 6 months to a year to rewrite it, right?
That's
So,
so true. It's true.
no, I just love that you really were convinced from the beginning, like what this book needed to be, and that you really stayed true to that and even advocated for yourself and your book with your editor when you were having those discussions about the placement of the information in the sidebars.
As well as the illustrator. There are many, authors don't usually have a say as to who the illustrator is going to be. That is the kuleana, that is the responsibility of the publishing company. But I'm so grateful again to Carol Hintz. I had asked her if, because of the Hawaiian, the deep cultural nature of the topic, if we couldn't find a native Hawaiian illustrator. We have so many talented artists. I knew there was somebody out there. I didn't know who would be best. Just because I like someone's art doesn't mean that they can do the picture book, with the deadlines and working with the art director, things like that I don't really know. And it was actually, so we brainstormed the list, and actually Carol found Harry Nunny, and I'm very, very happy with that. So again, I guess I advocated. I believe that we should always try to bring people along with us, so it's something that I believe, and I want to encourage more Pacific Island and Native Hawaiian writers and illustrators as well. I'm just very, very, very grateful to Carol that she agreed, because as it turns out, Harry was the perfect choice for this book.
Well, the art, yeah, the art is absolutely
Yeah.
stunning. And like you said, because your text is so spare,
Yeah.
in the main text,
Mhm.
the art has a really important storytelling role. It's telling a lot of the story.
The art has Easter eggs too, which
Oh, I love Easter eggs.
Easter eggs. And so let me see if I can find one that's this one. This one is the story of the first landing in January of 1976, the first 9. Okay, I don't know if it's called an Easter egg. That's just sort of what I heard on the internet. But this right here in the borders, she has this on every spread. And this tree here, this coconut, it actually goes back to the day that the activists landed in January of 1976. They planted a sprouting coconut tree. I don't think it lived, because they planted it in the sand, and they didn't have fresh water with them except whatever they brought to drink. But you see it, and it's all over the book. She's got these really fun things. I think Native Hawaiians would recognize them. I'm going to see if I can find a way to work with Harry to sort of reveal some of the
Oh,
Easter eggs. Somehow I just
like maybe a little hide and seek worksheet or something.
something I think would add some fun, especially to a classroom or to a
Oh, for sure.
family, people who are interested in learning more about the story.
Ah, I love that. I love that. Oh, well, thank you so much for this fabulous discussion, Kamalani. Tell us, like, where can readers connect with you, and where can they get this amazing book?
Thank you. Yes, my website is kamalani.hurley.com. And there you will find where to buy the book. It's at every, I'm grateful, it's at every large bookseller. Locally in Hawaii, if you were looking for an indie, Native Books Native books. We had our launch, our book launch, this past Saturday there. There are pictures on my website. And it was just the best. It's a Native Hawaiian owned bookshop. And so that is my favorite, but there are others. The Shop in Kaimuki, those are people who are watching and know what I mean. There are lots of really good places that they can get this book, as well as, fingers crossed, future books.
Oh.
I have, because I know you're going to ask me. I wrote 2 extension stories for the Moana 2 movie. I did.
Oh, right.
I don't know if you've ever written for Disney Press, but you're not told what format the work will take. So it could be its own standalone book, I hope, or it could be a story in a book of stories. I don't know, but so we'll see what happens with that. I think something comes out the first thing comes out in 2026.
Exciting.
Thank you. And then I also have 2 weeks ago, I signed a contract for a picture book biography about Dr. Isabella Iona Abbott. She is world renowned for her ethnobotany, but especially her seaweed science. And so I wrote a story about her. She's half Hawaiian, half Chinese. And so I wrote a story about Dr. Abbott. The thing I'm working on now with the manuscript due in 2 months is on the Honolulu Chinatown plague and fire of 1899 to 1900. You might wonder why I'm doing it on Chinatown. That was one of the first questions that a critique group asked me. Oh, why you? And I said, well, Chinatown actually is just the name that it was called. It was a mixed neighborhood, almost equally 1/3 Chinese, 1/3 Japanese, 1/3 Hawaiian. My great-great-grandparents are from the area. They're from Leleo, which is really close to it. And so, and Chinatown was much bigger than it is now. It's like 36 acres or whatever it is, how many blocks. It was much bigger back then. And so I have great-great-grandparents. I have roots going back there. So my book is, yes, it is on the Chinese people, but it really is through the Native Hawaiian point of view, because we all lived together and worked together and died together. And so that's a middle grade nonfiction book, maybe 2027, maybe.
Cool. All right. Well, I was going to ask, I thought it sounded more middle grade. I wasn't sure if it was middle grade or YA, but
they're going to love it. I mean, because it's about the plague, right? So I asked Carol Lerner. She, it's her, she bought the rights to the book. I said, geez, how do I tell a story, or how do I describe the plague? It's horrible. She told me they're going to love it. The kids are going to love it. I'm just going to be very matter of fact. And middle graders are just going to eat it up. I think it'll cause nightmares for little ones. Middle graders are going to love it. Because it also includes rats and other things, Yeah, they're going to love it.
Oh, I love it. Oh, well, I love hearing about all these good things happening for you.
Thank you, Kirsten.
I wish you all the best. I thank you so much for being with us today. And everybody go out and read Kaho'olawe. It is absolutely amazing.
One last thing, please, if I may.
Yes, go.
100% of my author's proceeds are donated to the grassroots Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana. And so they will benefit from the purchase of the books as well. So yes, learn the story and help the group that actually led the way for the island to be returned.
Yes, and it says it on the book, like it's printed on the book. So for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kamalani. I wish you all the best with your author journey, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. To get the full transcript of this podcast, sign up for my newsletter at KirstenWLarson.com. It will be sent out with the next regular mailing. All backlist episodes are available via the Nonfiction Kidlit Craft Conversations page on my website. You can watch on YouTube or listen wherever you get your podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast? If so, please consider leaving a rating or review to help more nonfiction lovers discover it. Join me next time when I speak to Anne Kofsky, author of Ping Pong Shabbat, illustrated by Abigail Rajanoff, and the forthcoming book, The Peddler and the President. We'll be discussing how school visits and venue visits can help you connect with your audiences. Until then, happy writing and revising.